Hello and welcome to this week's Give It to God live call hosted by Alison Larkin. I'm Sarah Hawksworth here to walk you through a bit of housekeeping and just to make an announcement on a time change for the call starting next week. At the moment, the call is running at 2 p.m. UK time, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, but from next week and moving forwards, call will be moving to 7 p.m. UK, 2 p.m. Eastern, and 11 a.m. Pacific. The register link will stay the same. So next time you register, you'll be registering for the new time at 7 p.m. UK, 2 p.m. Eastern, and 11 a.m. Pacific. Okay, on to the usual housekeeping now. Ali's going to talk in a few moments on today's theme for 50 to 60 minutes, and then she's going to open up the call for 30 minutes of Q&A. There's two ways you can interact during the Q&A. You can put your message in the Q&A box and just type it out, and Ali will answer it directly. Or you can jump on with your voice and have a one-to-one hot seat coaching session where you speak back and forth with Ali. As standard, we remove voices and names from the recording before the recording is posted on the YouTube channel. So no need to worry about anything and your name being posted online anywhere because we remove it as standard. If you have any questions, you don't have to wait until the Q&A is open in the last 30 minutes. You can post them at any time, but we ask that you keep all communication in the Q&A just so that Ali has an ease of finding it. Obviously, Zoom has many ways you can interact, but if you keep everything in the Q&A box, please, that makes it a lot easier on Ali's side. As I said, we do post the recording onto Ali's YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube at Alison Larkin in a few days. And if you'd like to watch the recording, please do. And we do recommend, though, during the call, if you'd like to take notes, please do. Ali always drops pearls of wisdom, and you might not want to wait 2 or 3 days to be able to hear them again. If you have any questions, again, please post them in the Q&A, and I will pass over to Ali to start today's call.
Hello, I am here, I promise. I was put my tea bag in the bin just when I heard Sarah saying, I'm going to hand you over to Ali. By the way, everybody needs to give a big boost of love to our Sarah, who has just travelled from Malta or Gozo to Vancouver over the past 2 days. A journey that took quite some time, and she is awake very early in Vancouver with jet lag so that she could introduce the call. So we all need to send a big boost of love and energy to Sarah. Welcome to Give It to God, my weekly workshop. We start every workshop, if you're new here this week, we start every workshop with a few minutes of silence together. Silence and stillness is where we meet the God that resides within ourselves. And so I like to start every call with just everyone in the room, a collective silence. Then we will have a short prayer, which, by the way, I wrote today while I was journaling, which I don't usually do, but I started journaling, like just freehand automatic writing this morning, and lots of things come out. So I brought the prayer with me and I'll read it out rather than just speaking to the highest version I carry within myself. I'm going to read to you something that I wrote in meditation and journaling. I've got both my air cons on right now. I don't know if it's loud. So if it is, if it's too loud, can you write in the Q&A and let me know? Also, just to let everyone know that the apartment that we're renting for summer is on the grounds of an absolutely beautiful church. It's called Our Lady of Victories. If you're ever in Gozo, then you should definitely come and visit it. And it's got an amazing restaurant right next door to it called Alsa, so go there as well. And this morning, the church bells have just been going off all morning. So I don't know if it's a feast day, a celebration of a saint on Gozo. It's a very Catholic island, but the church bells have been going for prolonged periods of time all morning and into the early afternoon. So if that happens and it becomes difficult for me to concentrate on what I'm saying, or difficult for you to hear, then we'll need to come up with a contingency plan during. Okay, so we're going to start with our few minutes of silence, and then we are going to go into a short prayer, and then I'm going to speak to you about this week's theme. So if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll just invite you to close your eyes now. I'm going to keep talking for a couple of minutes longer while everybody sits with their eyes closed. Then I will close my eyes and come into the silence with you. So just sit with your eyes closed. If you can, have both feet on the ground. If you're driving, once again, please do not close your eyes. Just have the moments of silence by yourself later on. I know that some people listen to this in the car. And also, if you're at home, if you want to lie down, if you want to sit in a lotus position, just whatever position you feel most comfortable in. And all I want you to do when you close your eyes and go into the silence, and I appreciate, by the way, there's no silence at the moment because I'm speaking. Just be aware of the thoughts, the feelings, and the sensations that arise in your body and in your mind when you close your eyes. When we close our eyes, we are sitting in darkness. We shut out the material world, the third dimension world that we live in, and we go inside, we go within. So, as within, so without, what is inside of you that arises when you close your eyes and when you sit in silence? All I want you to do is be a witness to it, be a watcher of what comes up for you, what rises within you when you go within. So close your eyes, both feet on the ground or in a comfortable position, and we'll go into the silence together. Ladies and gents, I'm going to invite you to come back into the land of the living, back into the world without, out there, and just be a witness to what came up for you as we sat together in silence there for 8 minutes. So I'm going to read to you some journaling that I wrote this morning, and included in it is the little prayer that I wrote while I was journaling. So I wrote, "There is only love, which is God. Nothing else. There is only love, nothing else. If we experienced anything less or lacking of God's love, we need only look with fresh eyes upon the experience, eyes of unconditional love and curiosity. How would it feel if I loved every experience I have?" I want you to write that down and meditate on it and journal on it this week. Everybody on the call, everybody listening on catch up. How would it feel if I loved every experience that I have? How would my life look? What would my life look like if I loved every experience that I have? And how would it feel to be me? I'd like you to write those down. I'm going to repeat them and give you a couple of minutes to write it down. How would it feel if I loved every experience that I have? What would my life look like? And how would it feel to be me? I also wrote, "May we all remember we are fragments of the source which we call God. We are God. We walk as God. We talk as God. We are God." A question that I asked myself afterwards, and I would ask all of you as well, is how would you walk through the earth if you truly believe that you are God, that you carry within you the fragment, which is your soul, of the whole, and the whole is God? How would you feel if you walked through this life, through this earth, knowing with every fibre of your being that you carry that fragment of God within you, and that that's who you truly are? That's your soul. That is the soul that you came to earth with. It is the soul that will leave this earth and go where we do not know. When you're finished in this human body, how would you feel? How would you walk? How would you talk? How would you treat others? How would you treat yourself? How would you create the life of your dreams if you truly believe that you are God and that you have a direct line, a direct connection with the source that created every single thing we can see on this planet? It is very, very noisy in Jara today, extremely noisy. There's lots of trucks and stuff going by outside, and I'll try not to get distracted by them as I was last week. So if you are new to the call, and I know that some people are this week, I go down tangents, I tell stories, I go down paths with my stories that I can't remember why I started them, and I get into a flow of speech, and then I've got to try and pull myself back out to where I originally was. When I have these calls, these workshops, it just shows you what the inside of my brain is like it's constantly creating new thoughts and creating new questions and theories. And I've been doing these calls for 2 months now, hopefully getting better at pulling myself back up from the tangents that I go down and not getting too lost down the paths that I take everyone, and also being able to tie the stories together and give them a meaning, which is the main point. So this week's theme is going to be on how God speaks to us, how we can hear the voice of God, not just through our own body, through our own intuition, through our own inner voice, but also through the inner voice of those we love who have passed on, maybe those we love who are still living, and also in the physical world round about us, how we hear the voice of God who speaks to us constantly through every single person on this planet. So if I, started the start of the workshop with how would you walk through the world if you know that you are God? You're God, but so is everyone else. So is every single person that you meet. And when I say that, you might start thinking about people in your mind that you think are definitely not aligned with God. People that agitate you, people that irritate you, people that you're having problems with at the moment. Or maybe you will think of everybody you love and you'll be able to see the God's energy that they carry within them. Every single person is God. even the people that agitate you, especially the people that agitate you, because they are put on your path to send you a message from God. And sometimes those messages have to be strong and intense in a way that causes a reaction in your system and your body that might not feel great in the moment, but allows us to feel something that we can then learn from. And that feeling is generally fear. Fear manifests as anger and irritation, and that's just your fight or flight kicking in, and you choose fight or you choose violence, as I like to say when my daughter wakes up in the morning grumpy, I'm like, she's woke up and chose violence today. That's just your fight or flight kicking in, and you've chose fight, and it comes across as irritation and anger, and it can be low level, which denotes low level fear, or it can be, an explosion because you're really, really in a state of heightened fear, and you feel like you want to fight, which was definitely my mode of fight or flight kicking in for most of my adult life until I realised it. So in the first instance, I've gone down a tangent that I can't remember why I started, and I've got to come back. So how does God speak to us? Through our own bodies, through the people round about us, through our inner voice, through our intuition. I'm going to tell you some stories this week about how God has spoke to me and how God is always listening. That energy we carry within us is always listening to us. It is somewhat neutral. It will give us anything that we ask for. So we have to be very, very careful of what we ask for and the energy through which we ask for it with. By that, I mean, if you're asking for something, if you're desiring something from a state of fear and you achieve your desires, but you're still in the state of fear, then you can't enjoy the desires that you've received. And also, you will just be in a perpetual state of fear until you recognize it and learn to process it and let it go. So, God is always listening. It's a neutral energy, and it gives us exactly what we need, exactly what we ask for, exactly what we require for the evolution of our soul. And I'm going to tell you this week some ways in which God has given that to me. So I'm going to start with a story about our friend, the taxi driver last week, the Scots Maltese taxi driver who I spoke about last week. And after I come off the call, I realised that I had spoke a lot about why I was placed on his path, but not so much why he was placed on mine. So if you haven't watched last week's call, I'll give you a brief explanation of what it was. We were in Malta. We got in a taxi, an Uber, my friend Sarah and I, and my daughter Frances, and the taxi driver was Scottish. I'm an absolute beacon, or I'm a Scots magnet. Everywhere I go, I meet Scottish people. Absolutely everywhere I go, I always end up talking to someone Scottish. And he was Scottish, he had a very broad accent, and we had a bit of a chat about where he was from. And then I mentioned that Sarah lives in Vancouver, and he was massively energized by this conversation. He sat up in his car seat, and not his car seat because that's for little kids, right? So not like a booster seat. He wasn't. Scotsmen are short, but they're not that short. Just like his seat in his car, right? Oh my. So he sat up straighter and he was all energized, and he began talking about his love for Canada and how he wanted to immigrate there, and he tried but he couldn't get in. And I asked him a question in the Uber, and I'm sure Sarah was sitting in the front, probably like, Ali's going to go off on one here. Well used to me dropping dropping truth bombs to Uber drivers. She's probably sitting there worrying about it, but I didn't get into a deep conversation with him. I just asked him one simple question, which I think, was the whole reason for the meeting. It wasn't the whole reason, which I'm about to explain. It was one of the reasons for the meeting. I asked him, which country would you prefer to live in? Which country do you prefer overall? Just one or the other, like a black or white answer, which was Canada or Malta, because he was also talking about how, he would love to live in Canada, but he couldn't go there, and how he was, accepting of the fact that he lives in Malta. And I asked him this question: where would you prefer to live? If you could have your dream life, where would you live? Canada or Malta? I can't actually remember how I phrased the question now. And he pushed the answer away for a bit. He made a comment like, "Oh, that's a really good question," which, you know, I've coached hundreds and hundreds of men and women, and it's a delay tactic of not wanting to verbalize the answer, perhaps hearing the answer and being a bit afraid of what you're going to say, perhaps not even hearing the answer because you're not connected enough with your instinct and your intuition at that moment. More often than not, though, I think it's actually hearing the answer and giving yourself a minute to before you verbalize it. You know, it's a phrase that's been said to me often throughout my coaching life is, "Oh, that's a good question." And generally what the person's doing is they're giving themselves a few minutes before the answer. So he did the same. And then, you know, I made a joke about like, "Oh, well, it's a great question, but when are you going to answer it?" He was a Scot, he could handle that. And he said ultimately Canada. He would choose to live in Canada. And then I said, "Oh," and as I was getting out, I made a comment about, "So when are you going to Canada?" And he says, "I can only dream, eh?" And I was like, "Yeah, but you can dream and you can also do. You can make it happen. You just need to figure it out." Just like left this statement and then get out the car. Just like, "Bye, have a good day." And so I told this story last week. I told it much more detailed and much more in depth of my take on what was happening and why God had placed me on his path and his on mine. But what I didn't delve into was why God had placed this man on my path. And the funny thing is, I was watching a video this morning and it was by an amazing spiritual teacher and author, Caroline Myss, who wrote the Anatomy of the Spirit, 7 Stages of Healing, amongst many other books, but that's the one that stands out for me. It's a really, really great book. And she, you know, she's a spiritual teacher. She's got many, many videos on YouTube. She runs programs. I really admire her work. And I watched this short this morning of her on YouTube, and the person asked, "How do you know if it's your intuition or if it's wishful thinking that you hear?" And she gave an answer that I've given a variation of many times, which is your intuition. You won't. She said it will make you feel uncomfortable. What I say to my clients is you won't like it. When you hear your intuition, when you hear the voice of God, when you hear the thing that you've got to do, you won't like it. She said it makes you feel uncomfortable. There's another word for uncomfortable. It makes you feel afraid and you don't like it and you want to push it away. So we often like to keep ourselves safe, and we like to tell ourselves little stories that keep us safe and keep us comfortable, and the knowledge that we are placating ourselves with these lovely little stories that we tell ourselves and how we narrate the world round about us. So I decided last week that this guy had been placed in my path to remind me that not everybody remembers that they're God and that they have this huge creative energy within themselves, and that's why he was placed on my path. What later transpired after a few days of meditating and journaling was I realised that he was placed on my path for something else that made me feel quite uncomfortable. So that's how I know that this is true, because I didn't love it in the first instance. And what happened was he said, he was talking about Canada, and he said that Canada just reminded them of a big version of Scotland. And I made this joke where I said, "Oh my, that sounds like my worst nightmare." And he looked at me in the rear view mirror and he looked a bit shocked. And the thing is, and I meditated on it for a couple of days later, I kept hearing me saying that to him looking shocked, and another sentence kept coming into my mind that someone else said to me last year. And I knew that all of them were interlinked, and I also knew that it was my intuition speaking to me, and I also knew that I didn't like it. So I had to let it percolate for a few days. And what happened was I said to him, "That sounds like my worst nightmare," and he looked shocked in the rear view mirror. And the reason why he looked shocked is Scots are extremely patriotic. We are an extremely patriotic nation, and we are especially patriotic away from home. So, you know, whenever you go in Scotland, whenever you go out into the world as a Scot, we're generally very well received by other people. You know, everywhere I go, people are like, "Oh, I love the Scots, I love Scottish people," and then they tell me a story about a time when they met a Scottish person and how great it was and how funny they were, and there's usually alcohol involved, and You know, we are very friendly, a very friendly nation, very stoic and very helpful. And this was further reiterated to me last week. So when I made that comment, that sounds like my worst nightmare. It was a joke, but I always say there's truth in every joke. And his look of shock nudged me. Now, when I say this, and I often talk about being nudged by the universe, being nudged by God, it's like somebody will say something, somebody will do something, something will happen outside of me, where it's almost like I feel a tap on my shoulder that's like, oh, pay attention to that. It's like a nudge, like the person's like, the person, God, is like nudging me, pay attention to that. And I got the nudge when I saw the look of shock on his in his eyes when I'd said that about Scotland. You know, a Scot away from home, essentially putting Scotland down doesn't generally happen. And I meditated on it for a couple of days. You know, if you've followed my work for a while, if you've been a client of mine, if you've read my book that I wrote in 2024, um, I had a very paradoxical childhood in Scotland where I had a lot of really, really good times and a lot of fun. I've got three brothers and a sister, and we grew up in a house that was definitely filled with a lot of fun and jokes and laughter and playing pranks on each other. And I grew up in a town where, you know, there was a lot of challenges. There is a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of love and a lot of friendship and a lot of loyalty and a lot of stoicism. So I grew up in that environment, and the paradox of that also is that I was molested in childhood and in my family home. So I had lots and lots of great memories of Scotland, and also lots of really, really not great memories of Scotland that are not just, you know, somewhat challenging. They were extremely big life events that challenged me in a lot of ways, uh, caused a lot of trauma, caused a lot of suffering throughout the first few decades of my life. And when I left Scotland in 2015, when I left, for the first few years, still look back with rose-tinted glasses. And then when my mother died in 2019 and I went into therapy in 2020 and began speaking about my childhood trauma for the first time properly with a really good, not just therapist, but also like very, I mean, no other word other than wonderful spiritual mentor. I began to process a lot of the anger and the shame and the fear, which I was dressing up in as fight or flight, into anger, choosing fight. I began to process that, and I directed a lot of the energy and a lot of the focus and a lot of the emotion towards Scotland as a whole, Scotland in general. It was like this was this place where all this trauma took place. So I just associated that with the trauma instead of remembering, you know, the amazing memories that I have, and also the wonderful people and all the things that Scotland has hugely in its favour. And over the years, it's somewhat lessened, but it's always kind of there in the background. This, don't know, I guess the word that, it's not a guess, the word that came into my body when I tried to search for a word, there was disassociation with Scotland. And you know, as I said, I meet people from all over the world, and someone I met recently and from Iran, and she just absolutely loves Scotland and was just like, this is amazing. She went to Glasgow, she went to Edinburgh, so it's absolutely beautiful. And you know, she couldn't understand why I don't go back to Scotland, why I don't visit. And then I explained some stuff to her about things that had happened to me in childhood, and she was like, okay, now I understand. She said, you know, coming from Iran, like I have a very similar feeling where it's like there's the regime, there's the war, but also all the great memories and a love for the people. But she's left Iran a long time ago as well. And someone said to me last year, I think you'll make friends with Scotland again. It was a lovely sentence and quite an unusual sentence. When I had a miscarriage last year, we were offered the choice of bringing the baby's remains home to be buried, and we went with that choice. And when we received the baby's remains home, I knew, I just had this feeling that we were going to bury the baby in Scotland. And once again, it was like one of those intuitive messages that came through my body, where I was sent like a list of burial grounds where we could go and have this very spiritual giving back to the earth of this little baby. And one of them was in Scotland, and it was in Aberdeen, which I'd never been to, a city I've never been to. And I just knew as soon as I read that name on the list that that was where I was going to take our son to be buried. And it was interesting to me that to have such a tense relationship with Scotland, but that was still the place where I chose to bury the baby. And we drove up to Aberdeen and we buried the baby there. And there was a wonderful lady at the burial ground. Her name was Fiona, and she was very typically Scottish, but just reminded me of every Scottish granny I've ever met. And she was just really kind and warm. And can hear my voice going, why do I do this every week? Loving. And I remember feeling really proud of being Scottish when I was there, and how lovely she was. I'm going to have to take a drink. I do this every week with my stories, don't I? We drove back down to Sussex and haven't been back to Scotland since. That was last summer. And someone had said to me, I think one day you'll make friends with Scotland again. And I remember when he said it, feeling like agitation in my body, like I don't want to make friends with Scotland. I'm fine without Scotland. And then, so when this Uber driver said last week that Canada reminded him of I need to drink my tea, guys, as well, because it goes, chocolate on my cup. It goes cold every week when I'm here telling a story, and then it just goes cold. I promise you there's a point to this. So when the Uber driver said that to me, I heard the other voice inside me. It says, one day you'll make friends with Scotland again. And it agitated me. Like it didn't sit well with me. I didn't feel good for a couple of days afterwards. And this is the point where I'm going to tell you about how God is constantly giving us what we need, and giving us the answers, the solutions to our challenges, and also giving us all of the tools that we need to heal. So I've got the Netflix app on my phone, and I probably will cry at this bit because I cried when I was telling my friend about it this week, that I got like a little notification that says something you might be interested in. And by the way, when I get notifications like this or emails that have things like that, and it's sentences like that where it's like, oh, that you might be interested in this, have you thought about this, have you thought about that? God is constantly speaking to us throughout every single day. One of my first mentors said to me, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And the day that he said that, was like a light bulb went off, and I was like, you're right. And I began to look for synchronicities and no longer dismiss them as coincidences. So if I get something on my timeline or on my phone notifications that nudges me, that piques my interest on something, especially if it's something I've been meditating on or thinking about, then I'm like, that's a message from God. That's a message from that divine source we carry within us, for me to go and look at this or go and learn something from this. So I got this message on my phone to say, this is something you might be interested in. And it was a dramatisation of the Lockerbie bombing in 1988. So the Pan Am flight that was bombed in the sky as it flew over Scotland in December 1988. And I don't watch a lot of things like that on TV because I'm extremely sensitive to anything with like bombs and violence and stuff. And by the way, the thing is, I was going to say I love it, but I don't love violence, but I love war films. I love war documentaries. I love anything to do with the camaraderie and the brotherhood of soldiers. Because I've loved the masculine, because I'm very interested in masculine energy and men in general and how they bond with each other. So I do love, and also I grew up with three brothers. So, you know, we watched a lot of boy films growing up. I'll probably get into trouble for calling it boy films, but that's what I call them. Um, and by the way, also just recently got into Spider-Man and then now going down a little Marvel rabbit hole, but we'll talk about that in another call. Um, and we're going to blame Sarah for that. Not blame her, we're going to say thank you to Sarah for that. She's introduced Ali to Spider-Man. That I really enjoy war movies, you know, action films and things like that. But I also recognise that I'm extremely sensitive to it, and that you know, I think I actually mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that when I watch movies or television programs, I jump quite a lot like this every time, you know, somebody, especially like somebody just randomly gets shot. I'm like, it's almost like I'm there in the room with the person. So I have to be aware of what that's doing to my central nervous system. Put it this way, it's not calming it down, is it? So when I first got this notification for the dramatization of the bombing. I think it was called the bombing of Pan Am 103. It was really, really good. And I was initially wasn't, you know, in a rush to watch it. And then something made me just turn it on. Frances was having trouble sleeping and I was sitting with her, and then I went out of the room and left her to try and fall asleep by herself. And I just clicked on Netflix while I was waiting to go back in and check on her, and I began watching it. And this was a couple of days after this conversation with this taxi driver where I had made this comment about my worst nightmare being a bigger Scotland. And straight away there was this like absolute feeling of nostalgia because the first voices that I heard were Glaswegian. Glasgow, you know, I grew up half an hour outside of Glasgow, so it's a very, very similar accent to my original accent that I've somewhat tried to soften over the past decade. But I felt this feeling of nostalgia, and it turns out, by the way, that the guy who did an amazing, amazing Glaswegian accent, in my opinion, is from Sussex, which is where I moved to when I left Scotland, and you know, stayed there for 10 years as well. So he just does a really, really good accent. And but straight away I was like kind of pulled in by the nostalgia of hearing the Scottish voices. And then there were 6 episodes and I watched them all quite quickly. And when I was telling my friend about it a couple of days later, I kept crying every time I was trying to tell the story. And I was like to her, you need to watch it, you need to watch it. She's like, I don't really like watching stuff like that, you know, it's a bit sad. And then I'm crying trying to tell her about it. And I was like, the reason why I was crying is not sadness, it was actually love. It was like this strong, strong feeling of love because there's a great emphasis on this programme. And if you got it on Netflix, I urge you to watch it. There's a great emphasis on the Scottish people and the kindness and the stoicism and the love that Scottish people just exude very naturally. And try not to cry. Try not to cry. Wait a minute, I'll take a drink of my lukewarm tea. As I try not to cry telling my story. What happened was exactly what someone said to me last year. I think one day you'll make friends with Scotland again. I began to make friends with Scotland again, and I began to remember, wow, like this is quite challenging. I began to remember lots and lots and lots and lots of stories of similar situations where I should not tell stories that make me cry on this call. Lots and lots of stories where those warm, loving, kind personalities of the Scottish people, just ordinary Scottish folk. I began to remember all these stories of when I had been a recipient, when I'd been a witness to it, when I had been that person for other people. And so much pride, so much love, so much just connection with the country where I was born again. And then I realised that God had put me on that Uber driver's path, but he'd also put him on mine. And all of those conversations, the person saying to me a year ago, I think you make friends with Scotland again. Me feeling agitation in my body when that was said to me, that's a nudge, right? That's a nudge from God. It's like, well, why are you agitated by that? Why would you not just accept it? What is it about that sentence that you don't like? I often say this to my clients, like if you hear something, someone says something to you, someone makes a comment, you hear something outside yourself and it makes you feel a certain way inside. And by a certain way, I mean agitated, annoyed, irritated, angry, afraid, all these really strong emotions, then it's because there's something within you that needs to be looked at surrounding that. Okay. So, you know, I say this to people all the time. If someone come up to me in the street and said, "Oh, I really like your blue hair," I wouldn't be upset about it at all. I would just think the other person was quite delusional. And I would just be like, I don't have blue hair. This is like quite amusing. I'd find it amusing. I'd be a bit curious as to why they said it. Probably think that I'm being filmed for something and my reaction's going to be put on the internet somewhere. So if you're ever thinking of doing that, then, you know, you could ask me or tell me that you like my blue hair and see what my reaction is. But I wouldn't be upset about it, right? I'd never ever be upset about it because with every fibre in my being, I know it's not true. If someone questions something that I have within me, any sort of energy of doubt, of fear, and it is fear around, someone makes a comment, someone says something to me, someone says something about me, something happens outside of myself that I feel any sort of agitation within my system, then that's a nudge from God, a nudge from the universe, a nudge from the divine source for me to look at. It's on me to look at it. So when the person said to me, I think you make friends with Scotland again one day, and I immediately resisted it and I felt this agitation in my body and I was a bit like, well, you don't understand. What do you know? Didn't say these words out loud, but I certainly felt them. And then again, a whole year later, when you know this Uber driver, when I made the comment about Scotland, and he kind of looked a bit like I'd slapped him, and he looked at me in the rear view mirror. Again, it was a feeling in my body like, oh, there's an imbalance there. There's a disconnection. There's a disassociation. There's something that you need to look at because that's creating a feeling of discomfort in your body. And my wonderful ego coming up with this story. Oh, he was placed on my path so that I would remember that not everybody knows that not everybody, so that I would realise that not everybody remembers their God. Because that's a story that I could tell myself that feels quite nice. And then to discover upon meditation and letting the messages come up through my body and through journaling, like a couple of days later, no, actually, he was putting your path to see why you still have this feeling of agitation around Scotland. And then watching this programme for a few days afterwards and starting to feel this really, really warm connection with Scotland again and looking at it through the eyes of unconditional love and curiosity rather than through the lens of someone that was traumatised in this particular space, this particular, you know, physical location. That's not all that my childhood was about. It wasn't all about the abuse and the other things that happened there. There's many stories that make up my whole childhood, and lots and lots and lots of them were very lovely and kind and joyful. And I think when you go on this journey, you can sometimes just look back, and because there's so much agitation and anger and fear around the stories that were repressed for such a long time, you look back and it almost like causes this cloud over the things that you actually really loved. And this can happen not just looking at your childhood, but looking at your relationships with people in the past or the present that have caused you discomfort and caused you suffering or pain. Like I was having a conversation with someone recently where there's a nuance around and such a nuance around not allowing people to be in our lives who hurt us, continuously, but also being able to remove ourselves from the situation, and God will remove you from every situation that you need to be removed from. And when I say God, I mean your highest self. I mean that energy that you carry within you. God's not a person. He's not a man on another planet that's going to pick you up and put you somewhere else. God is a I keep hearing this recently and it just always it almost just came out of my mouth in this way. God is a scientific fact. That's what I almost said. God is science. Like we will figure this out at one point that God is just an energy source that is pure science that is trying to get us to evolve as we go through our lives for the evolution of the collective. So that God, that energy within you, when we talk about the things that God does, it sounds like we're personifying God, but I'm not. I'm not personifying God. I don't believe that God is a person. I don't believe it's a being. I say he simply because it's easier, simply because it's, the way that I've always said it. I don't even believe that God is fully masculine. I think it's God is masculine and feminine. There's both aspects of it. So, and I think that we connect with it through the masculine and feminine that we carry within ourselves. But I say God and I say he, and the way that I tell the stories about what God does, it sounds like I'm personifying God, which I most certainly am not. So if you're in a situation where someone has, hurt you or agitating you, or perhaps it's a parent, perhaps it's a partner, perhaps it's a sibling or a child. When we are agitated by someone, we can often forget the good things that they have also done. And that's not to excuse the less than good things, the less than beneficial things that people have done to us and by us and all of that. And I'm not certainly not condoning it and certainly not encouraging anybody to hang around people that hurt you. But much like my view of Scotland as a whole was for a long time viewed through the lens of suffering and trauma and fear and shame. I can't, it's not beneficial for me. It's definitely not beneficial for the evolution of my consciousness to only see Scotland in that way. And God sent me a very clear message about that. And it's something that's probably been percolating in the back of my subconscious since last summer when this person said to me, I think you'll make friends with Scotland again. That opportunity was always going to arise, and it arose in the form of an Uber driver who I and my egotistical self thought that I was divinely placed on his path just to help him, and then realised that he was divinely placed on my path to help me, and feeling really, really grateful for it. And this is what I mean by God speaks to us and the people round about us. He speaks to us through ourselves. He speaks to us in experiences that we have and conversations that we have and meditations that we have. Like the world is constantly talking to us, it's constantly communicating with us. And I ask for this every single day. I ask for it every morning in my journal where I constantly write, and I start my journaling, dear God. Sometimes I'm feeling a bit funny, I'll write dear God stroke dear me. And then I ask for things to be shown to me that day. And one of them is, please speak to me, please communicate with me through whichever means you find necessary to get the message to me so that I can hear it. And then my job is to just remain present and view the messages and receive the messages that my body, that God is giving to me every single day. And how do I know when God is speaking directly to me about something that I need to look at in order to evolve not just my consciousness, but the collective consciousness as a whole? Because it makes me feel uncomfortable. It agitates me. I don't like it. It makes me feel scared. Now, that's not always the case, okay? Sometimes God will speak to you and it'll be absolutely lovely and joyful, and you will you can also miss that because you're too busy walking about your everyday life to understand that actually you're receiving exactly the thing that you've asked for and exactly the thing that you've needed. So I'll tell you another story about how that has transpired this week. So I got a message from God that made me feel uncomfortable, but then I also got a message from God that made me feel deeply, deeply comforted and provided for and protected and safe. So that you can see the fact that God works across all the spectrums. If I tell you the way of, when I described to you the way in which God spoke to me this week through that Scottish taxi driver, how my wonderful ego created a way that it was created a story so that God was speaking to me in that way, in a way that I could find comfort from, and that I didn't have to reach deep inside to myself and meditate on, you know, unspent energy, unspent emotions that I still have for my birthplace. One of those reasons for God placing that Uber driver on my path is a lot more palatable to me than the other. The one where it's like, oh, it was just to remind you that not everybody remembers that they're God, then that's so lovely, right? That's quite a nice message, and it's easy for me to digest. Or no, he was put in your path to make you look at this unspent trauma and unspent emotion that you still have around Scotland. Well, that feels a bit more uncomfortable. That feels a bit more challenging. That requires me to do a bit more work. So you can see then how the ego will constantly placate us, even when we are given a message through our intuition or through the world round about us. The ego might jump in front of it and give you a lovely little story. And this is what I wrote today. How would it feel if I loved every experience that I have? Those experiences that produce discomfort, produce fear, produce agitation. The best thing that we can do for our own evolution, for the evolution of the collective, is to start to seek out those experiences, put ourselves in positions to experience it, and also learn to love that feeling, learn to love the feeling of discomfort, learn to not be afraid or feeling nervous, learn to embrace and welcome the feeling of fear and anxiety and being challenged is the absolute best thing that we can do for our evolution. We grow more in adversity than we ever will in comfort. And many people would argue with me about that, and they would say that, if we focus on the discomfort, then we'll just get more of that. It's been said by lots and lots of great minds, many books that I've read and seminars that I've listened to. I personally know through turning around and looking my own suffering in the face, my own traumatic experiences in the face, like looking right at them and sitting with them and processing the emotions that I repressed during the times of the suffering is by far the greatest thing I've ever done for my own evolution. And it's something that I'm continuing to do every single day. It's a journey that you're on for the rest of your life. When you sign up to this path, and often it's not a voluntary sign up, you're just, the pen's put in your hand and you sign the form. Not literally. It's an understanding that it's a path you'll be on for the rest of your life, because you're constantly wanting to evolve more, you're constantly wanting to learn more, you're constantly wanting more awareness of your own, not only your own habits and behaviours, but how they affect the world round about you, and how you're here in service to the world instead of just here to get what you can. And that's not an easy path for anyone, but it's the glorious path. It's the most joyful path, because if you can feel the suffering and feel the trauma and feel the horrendous emotions that come along with things like that, if you can feel it and then process it and let it go, then you have plenty and plenty and plenty of room to feel the joy and the happiness and the bliss that comes on the other end of that spectrum. A Carl Jung quote just come into my system, but I always get these quotes wrong, and also I can't quite remember what it is, but it's something about reaching into the depths, into the darkness, as far down as you can reach into the darkness. Is it's in direct correlation with how much you can reach up to the light, and how much you can reach the joy and reach the happiness and reach the abundance and reach the connection with those higher energies that we were all born to experience. If you numb yourself to the pain, then you're also numbing yourself to the joy. So it's best to look at both, which is my opinion on it. So, God, if I take it back, how am I doing with the old taking it back? Someone write to me in the comments and say, and just give me some feedback, say what I'm saying is making sense, and give me some thoughts on it. I got the message loud and clear about making friends with Scotland, and then God sent me via Netflix. So, you never know where these messages are going to come from. God sent me via Netflix a solution to the challenge of still having that fear around Scotland that manifests in the form of agitation, that manifests as fight or flight and me choosing fight. And a reminder that it was still in there, and a reminder that there's more to be looked at. And I always say to my clients, when the wound is deep, you have to clean it many times. And is there still clearing to be done of the wounding around my childhood and subsequent years I spent in Scotland where I had many, many challenges? Yes. Do I think that it will always be the case? I'm not sure. I can't sit here today and tell you what my life will look like in 5 years' time. I can only say that the words seeped out of my mouth in the back of an Uber, and it was an indication to me and everybody else in the car that there's still definitely some energy and some emotions around Scotland that are not being viewed through the eyes of unconditional love and curiosity at all times. So therefore I still have work to do on it. And this wonderful Uber driver came along and showed me that. And that was a message from God, and how, and my job is to be present enough to understand that. So I'll tell you another instance where God spoke to me this week through these through the power of people round about me, but it was much more joyful, and it was much more instantaneous, and also easier for my ego to to accept and to manage. So it's not all challenges, it's not all pain and discomfort, and having to face challenges with courage. There's also many, 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 many times throughout your day that you will receive from God without realizing that you're receiving from God, because you're not present enough to understand it, and also because you have you don't have a belief that there's this divine energy that's just constantly providing you with everything that you ask for. So the lovely Sarah was in Gozo with Francis and I for the first 2 weeks that we were here, and she stayed here in our apartment. And Sarah Sarah and I have lived together before, and she recognises the things that I find challenging. She recognises them very, very well, and she steps up and accommodates a lot of the things that I find challenging. And recently we were visiting another friend of ours, and she remarked on the fact that Sarah remembers specific things that happened throughout the day, and throughout the week, and she's very, very good at the logistics and remembering the facts, right? And I maybe that's why we're friends. I'm not good at that. And my other friend said, Sarah's so good at that. She's really, really good because we're commenting something. And I was like, and I'm not. And she's like, no, no, you bring other things to the table. And when this happened this week, I was like, what exactly do I bring to the table? And the really, really weird thing is that I remember numbers, I remember names, I remember stories. I could probably tell you the names of the children of every single client I've ever coached over the past 6 years. I could probably tell you all of their children's names. I could probably tell you all the children's ages. I could, if they spoke to me about their parents, I could tell you their parents' names and what they did for a living. Like, I've got a really, really good memory for stuff like that, but I can't remember what I had for my lunch today, and I can't remember what day the bin goes out. So I remember all these things that live in another realm, but I don't remember the things that happen in the everyday life that I live in, which is a challenge. And one of my first mentors said to me, "You don't live here, Ali, you live in another dimension," which I really, really liked, because I was like, that's a lot different to sounding like Ali's just a bit scatty and she doesn't remember stuff. So it's much nicer to hear that the reason why I don't remember things like when the bins go out and what I had for lunch is because I don't live here, I live in another dimension. And I live in this dimension where we're all connected together, and I'm over here meditating on on the things that I've seen and things that I've heard. So that's a long story to tell you that I don't put the bins out. It's not my bit. It's never been my bit. When I lived in Scotland for a long time with my older daughter, I was reflecting on this week, and I was like, I must have put the bins out when I lived in Scotland because no one else did it for me. So I don't put the bins out because it's not my bit. I don't do it. I'm quite handy at a lot of other things, but the bins, put out the trash, as they say in North America. And when Sarah and I lived with each other before, she just automatically did it, which is, I think, the sign of a good friendship, is that she just automatically recognises the stuff that I can't do and she does them. And I recognise the stuff that she finds challenging and I bring it forward for her to look at. Hopefully that's what she gets from our friendship. Sarah, you can tell me here if that's not what you get from our friendship, if you get something else. But Sarah, first of all, I also need to explain this to you, that the bin situation and process in Malta and Gozo is the most complex thing I've ever come across in my life. There is literally like a whole matrix. Sarah has wrote that this is what she gets from our friendship, and also I'm very good at making tasty food, which I feel quite happy about, quite proud of. So back to the bin situation in Malta. It's hugely complex. There's like a matrix on the wall of what day what bins go out, and they have to be put outside on the street at a certain time for the bin men to come and collect them. So there's no, because there's a lot of apartments, there's no outside bins, like garbage places. Everybody keeps the bins within their home and then they put them on the street on the day that they've to be collected. So there's like a big matrix on the wall. It's got different colours, different days. It's got all this information. I didn't even look at it. Sarah looked at it. You know, I for the first 2 weeks of the vacation, I'd gone the cupboard and the bin's empty or the bin's full, and then a couple hours later, I'd gone and the bin's empty. It's not something. It's not Ali's bit, and it's not something that I partake in. Then Sarah went back to Vancouver, and there's a couple of things that I've been meditating on for the past couple of days as to what was happening here on the surface and what was actually happening underneath. I'm here in Malta on Gozo, which is Malta's little sister island, which is very, very small. And it's just Francis and I. And this is my second time staying in this part in Gozo. It's an absolutely beautiful little village called Jara. We're in a gorgeous apartment in a very quiet little village, we're right on the square. It's absolute perfection. So, so blessed to be here. Every night there's hundreds of people on the square. There's loads of restaurants round about. There's live music. It's beautiful. It's a really, really wonderful place to be. I find it challenging being in a foreign country, just me and Francis, and also driving here in Malta. And I scraped my car last week, which might be a story for next week. And so I've hired a car. The drivers are a bit crazy. The roads are very, very narrow, and a lot of the time there's not enough space for two cars on the road, and then people just park anywhere. And one thing that I noticed is that most cars have got dents in them, and it's because people are just bashing into them everywhere you go. So here I am in a foreign country. Thankfully, most people speak English because my Maltese isn't great yet. With my little 10-year-old, we're exploring, we're going new places, we're going to places that we've been, but this time rather than doing it with me and Sarah, it's me and Francis on our own. And the thing about, I was a single parent for a long time with my older daughter, and then not as much with Francis, is the contrast between having another adult with you when you're outside with a child and being outside with a child by yourself. There's a huge contrast between the two, because if there's another adult there, there's another set of eyes on her. There's someone else to hold her hand when I'm looking in my purse for something. If I've got to go into this shop and she doesn't want to go, then, you know, Sarah's like, I'll happily wait outside with her. There's just like so much more support. And it's not like this is like the hardest thing to do in the world. I'm not exaggerating it. I'm just like I find it quite challenging. Francis and I are both extremely feminine. We both get very emotional when we're tired. We're both emotional in certain situations, and we can sometimes clash because of that. Well, we clash quite a lot because of that, and like it's like me taking a step back and being like, I actually have to be more aligned with the masculine within myself at this point, because if I'm trying to be in the feminine, the mother role, then what we're doing is we're bashing against each other like this. So all of this was knowledge, awareness was accumulating in my subconscious as we were going up in the days towards Sarah going back to Vancouver on Monday. And we were all sad all weekend, and we went to our favourite restaurant at the weekend. I think we went on Sunday for lunch. Oh no, Sunday evening. And we've been to this restaurant a couple of times. It's right downstairs from us, and the waiting staff. It's if you're ever on Gozo, it's called Al Sal. It's a fine dining restaurant. It's absolutely beautiful. The food is amazing, but the thing that's by far and above the best experience of it all is the waiting staff. The waiting staff are the best I've ever experienced in my life. They are so attentive and friendly and communicative without being like in your face every 5 minutes asking you if you're enjoying the food. And we've been a couple of times, and from the minute we went in with Francis the first time, the the waiting staff is all male. Francis, she loves the company of men. And she was just like chatting away to all the boys, and they were chatting with her. And she's got a little puppet that she takes everywhere with her called Jeremy, because she's going through this stage in life just as she's about to enter into puberty, where she feels self-conscious and shy in some situations, and she's got this little puppet, and sometimes he talks for her and he says the things that I think Francis is too afraid to say. So she takes Jeremy with her everywhere she goes, and these boys, when we went into the restaurant, were like, oh, and who's this? And she was saying, this is Jeremy. And they immediately set a place at the table for the puppet, and she doesn't like it when I describe him as a puppet. I've got to describe him as a dinosaur. He's a T-Rex. They immediately put a place at the table for him and put a plate out for him and put bread on the plate. And Frances was just absolutely over the moon. She just thought this was the best thing ever. And much like in all countries in Europe that I've been with Frances, the waiting staff, the service staff, people that you meet, the thing that always stands out to me much more than in the UK or in North America or anywhere else I've been, is that they absolutely love kids. Like, they're really engaging with kids. They chat to them. They're welcome in restaurants. They're welcome everywhere you go. So these guys were over chatting, and then there became this running joke. I've got no idea why, but I was getting bullied by all the waiting staff, where they decided that I wasn't to get any pudding after dinner because I somehow insulted Jeremy. And the waiter came over and he gave everybody a spin for pudding, and he didn't give one for me, and he gave Francis two. And it was this big joke, and everybody was involved in it, all the waiting staff. And it was just like this wonderful experience of a lunch that we had. And when I said to Sarah at the table the other morning, what should have been the highlights of your holiday? And it was one of the things she said, that lunch in Al Sal that day. It was just so much fun. And we were all laughing and joking with each other. And from the minute we left, Francis was like, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back. When can we go back? When can we go back? And so I was like, right, okay, we'll go back. And then we decided we were going to go to another restaurant that I visited a couple of times, which is, the food is just absolutely unreal. And I haven't been for a few years, and I was excited to go. And it was down near the ferry. And I was like, right, we'll go there for your farewell dinner to Sarah. I was like, instead of like going somewhere in the square, we'll go down to Ganglesham. And so we were like talking about, I was like, oh, you're going to really like it. The puddings are really good, and we're chatting about it and stuff. And then Francis like, no, I want to go to Al Sal. I don't want to go to the other place. I want to go and see the boys. So we were going out that night to feed the wall cats. There's 3 cats living in a wall at the bottom of the street, and go down and feed them every evening. And all the boys were standing in the square, and they're all like, Francis, Francis. She runs up, and the head waiter gives her a lollipop and gives a lollipop for Jeremy. And she said, we're going to come to the restaurant. We're coming to the restaurant. I want to come to your restaurant. And he hugs her and he goes, well, if you come tomorrow, I'll give you a free ice cream. And I was like, mate, come on. We were trying to get her to try somewhere else, and now she's not going to because you just told her she's going to get a free ice cream. So that's all I'm going to hear all night and all tomorrow morning. And he's laughing, and I was like, oh, you guys know what you're doing and stuff. And they were all round chatting to her. So, of course, we had to go to El Sal. We didn't end up going to the other restaurant, but, I'm definitely going to go soon. And so we went the next day to El Sal, and it was the same again. They had the space set for Jeremy. There's the church bells. I don't know if you can hear them. So we went to El Sal the next day. I went downstairs. I told them Sarah was leaving and could we book a table? And they said, yeah, is that for 3 plus Jeremy? Boy said, and I was like, yeah. So we went down the next morning, and they'd set the table, and they'd set a special place for Jeremy, and he had his own seat and everything again. Francis was delighted. So the next day, Sarah's going back to Vancouver, and for a couple of days, this has been percolating in the back of my subconscious that I was afraid of her going, because it means that it's just me and Francis and Gozo by ourselves, and should anything arise, any challenges arise, and it's just me and her. And I'm the full protector, the full provider. We've got to be mum and dad. I've got to be everything to her for the remaining 2 weeks of our holiday. And I could feel it manifest. I could feel it like in my body. I could feel it in my subconscious for a couple of days before it. And I spoke to Sarah about this, and she took it in the way that I fully intended, which was my fight or flight response has always been fight. Okay. And I think also a huge part of that is because when I was abused in childhood, when I was molested, I froze. My fight or flight response wasn't fight in the first couple of instances. It happened only for about the first couple of times, and then I think on the third or fourth time my fight or flight kicked in the form of fight, and that was how subsequently it stopped happening. But for the first few times that it happened, that my fight or flight response was freeze, or the other way that I would put that is flight, where I flew into myself and I disconnected my mind from my body. So I flew away, didn't fly into myself, I flew away. And I disconnected from my body, and I just allowed what was happening to happen. Because of that, because of the understanding that maybe like on the third or fourth time it happened, that I chose fight, and I subsequently stopped it from happening any further. My go-to fight or flight response has always been fight. It took me such a long time to understand that that was conditioned into me because of the environment I grew up in, with 3 brothers and a sister, and a lot of chaos and a lot of big personalities, and rough and tumble life, and also the environment I grew up in and the town that I grew up in, and then also how that manifested in adulthood in every area. So sarcasm is a very, very low level of fight or flight. Agitation, frustration, irritation, these little comments that come out, that seep out of our mouth when we are vibrating a state of fear, and the situation doesn't arise for fight, as in like standing up and physically fighting, but arises for some level of fight or flight, which comes out in the form of sarcasm or like little snarky remarks, which I was the absolute queen of. And it took me such a long time to realise that was because of a continued state of fight or flight. So now I recognise it more when it comes in, and I recognise that this agitation that I feel in my body is due to the fact that I'm vibrating at a state of fear, and that fear is from preconditioned programming that I've got somewhere inside of me, that this story that I'm telling myself deep in my subconscious, that this thing's going to happen and it's going to feel this way. And until I have an awareness of that, then I can't change it. I can't change the program and recode my system. So my fight or flight was kicking in for a couple of days before Sarah was leaving, because the preconditioned programming I had was that, I'm going to be in a foreign country, just me and Francis. That's going to be challenging for me. And somewhere deep in my subconscious, I was whispering that to myself, but I couldn't quite hear it. And it came up in the form of agitation. And we were we were in Malta, the Big Sister Island. And I said to Sarah the next day, I was like, this is when I realised how much I was aligning myself with this state of fear at you going. It's because you started annoying me. And she just started laughing, because by the way, I've said this to her before in other contexts, where I was like, just everything you were doing was annoying me. It was like over the course of one morning, and so she was in the kitchen, and she was getting in my way when I was in the kitchen. I was like, I could hear myself in my head. I was going, she's annoying me, and then we went out for breakfast, poor Sarah. We went out for breakfast in this terrible restaurant in Malta, which I won't name, but it was really, really bad. And they were playing music and Sarah was dancing at the table and she was like going like this and it was annoying me. And I was like, in my head, I was like, why is she dancing? That's so annoying. Which, by the way, I am the absolute queen of kitchen dancing. So that was the nudge that I needed. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, what's going on inside of you that you are annoyed about the fact that she's dancing? Like I love dancing. I love, one of my ethos is dance in your kitchen every day, absolutely every day. Dance in your kitchen and your life will be more joyful. So my friend is having so much fun in this, albeit very shit restaurant, and she's dancing to the music. She likes the music. We're playing I Spy, this perpetual game of I Spy that we've played for weeks, and I was annoyed, but I wasn't annoyed. I was afraid, and my fight or flight was kicking in, and I'd chosen fight. I'd chosen violence against poor Sarah, and I told her about it the next day at the breakfast table, and I was like, "That's how I know that I'm feeling nervous about you leaving. That I'm feeling anxious." So before she left, I was like, "What about the bins?" Right? I promise there's a point to this story. Um, I was like, "What about the bins?" And she said, she showed me the matrix on the wall. And she said, right, you just put the bins out at night. And that was it. And I was just like, right, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So anyway, Sarah leaves that day and the bins were on my mind the whole day. Now, the bins are like, they're symbolic of something else here, right? They've taken on like a whole new layer of pressure. It's not the bins, it's never the bins. It's the fact that I have to do something in a certain way and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it because this is not my bit. This is not the thing that I'm good at, is remembering processes and systems and adhering to them, to guidelines in that way. And apparently you get fined if you don't stick to the bin schedule, and people will complain about it. And by the way, like you're walking through Malta and there's like signs up outside people's houses, handwritten signs. Remember the bin, like stuff about the. It's like it's a thing. It's like a big thing here in Malta, and so, but it wasn't the bins, right? It wasn't. It was how am I going to do this? How am I going to cope here by myself for 2 weeks? How am I going to get Francis back across the main island and then on a flight back to London in a couple of weeks' time? And just telling myself that you can do this. You're building it up into something that it's not. You're creating the reality that you live in. You're feeling challenged by something that's absolutely not a challenge, and or maybe it is a challenge, but it's a challenge that you're supposed to be facing in order to learn stuff about yourself along the way. So I'm having these dual conversations with myself where I'm telling myself all this stuff, but also on the other hand, I'm going, well, what if I get the bins wrong? I'm going to get the bins wrong and I'm going to get fined. And so I go downstairs on the first night that Sarah's gone, and I go down with the bin and I'm like all happy with myself that I've remembered to do it, first of all. And I know the right bin, I know the right colour of the bag, and I go downstairs and I go out the front door and it's out onto a square. It's absolutely beautiful and it's filled with people. And I'd said to Sarah, where did I put them? She said in front of the plant pots outside Al Sal, which is the restaurant that we'd been going to. And so I'm standing there in the middle of the square with the bin bag. And one of the waiters runs over from Al Sal, John, and he's like, Ali, you can't put the bins in. And I was like, Sarah said I could put the bins out. She said I have to put this bin out at night. I have to put it in front of the flower pot. And he's like, no, it's too early. The people will complain and you'll get a fine. And he's like, you can't put it out this early, put it out before you go to bed. And I was like, okay, so it's at this point it's maybe like 7 o'clock. And I was like, okay, no, I made a mistake, right? I made a mistake on the bins situation. And I've forgotten about a bit about this. Prior to that, I'd written in my journal, um, dear God, please speak to me loud and clear about any solutions to any challenges that I have while I'm here with Francis by myself. Speak to me through other people, speak to me through my body when I'm in a moment of silence. Give me the solutions that I need for any challenges that I will face. And while I was writing it, I was thinking about the bins. I was like, give me a solution to this. If I get the bins wrong, give me a solution. So John was like, no, take the bin back upstairs and bring it out later tonight. So I come back upstairs and I texted Sarah and I was like, John said not to put the bins out yet. And she went, well, generally put them out when it's dark, like, so put them out much later. And I was like, right, okay. And I could feel myself feeling a little bit nervous about it. And once again, not the bins, right? Symbolic of something else. And so Frances and I are watching a movie and she's got her pajamas on and it gets to about 11 o'clock and I was like, right. So she looked out on the balcony and there was one of the other waiters and she's like, oh, and then she saw a cat. And she's like, Mom, there's a cat, can we go down and see it? And I was like, right, okay, she's obsessed with cats. So I got the bin bag again and I'm like, right, I'm ready. It's 11 o'clock, it's dark. There's hardly anybody left on the square. There's still some people having dinner because it's Europe and they eat dinner at 11 o'clock here. But it's not as mobbed as it was before. So I take the bin bag and I leave it. This time I was like, I'm going to leave it on the front step and I'm not going to walk right out with it. I'm going to go out. I'm going to see where I have to go with it and give myself a bit more space. And I walked out and the waiter from outside comes out, a different waiter, the head waiter, and he comes up and he says to Frances, oh, you're in your pajamas, princess, and he's hugging her. And I said to him, I'm just about to put the bins out. And he's like, no, no, Ali, you can't put the bins out. It's still too busy. And he's like, you'll get fined. And I was like, but we're going to bed. John said we could put the bins out when we go to bed. Like, help me out here. And I was like, John said, put the bins out before you go to bed. I don't know what to do. And he was like, Ali, how many bin bags have you got? And I said, 2. And he's like, okay, leave them on your front porch and I'll take the bins and I'll put them in our big bin and we'll put it out tonight and you don't even have to worry about it. If you've got any bins, just come and tell me and we'll sort it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and got my 2 bin bags, put them on the porch. Frances and I went up, went to bed, everything's great. Journaling before bed, and I was like, everything that you wish for with a truthful heart will instantly be made manifest. That afternoon, I'd written in my journal, or that morning, I'd written in my journal, just give me the solutions to any challenges that come up while when Sarah's away and I'm here with Frances by myself. Now, you might listen to me telling that story. It's going to be a long-winded story, so I hope you listen to all of it. And be like, it's just a coincidence, right? You know, these boys that are in the restaurant next door, like it's a coincidence. You went down, John was standing, then the other waiter was standing, and you know, doesn't mean that it's a message from God. It doesn't mean that you've manifested something. It doesn't mean that you're powerful. It's just a coincidence. And you know, that's your prerogative. That could be your outlook on life. That could be what you believe and the lens through which you live your life. The lens through which I live my life is that everything on this planet is God. Everything on this planet is an aspect of God, and it's constantly communicating with me, and it's constantly trying to help me live the best possible life that I can live. And sometimes in that trying to help and trying to guide, I don't like the guidance that I'm receiving. I don't like the help that I'm receiving. I don't like the feeling in my body when I am guided to look at something that causes me pain to look at, causes me trauma, causes me feelings of repressed emotions that were buried deep inside of me long ago because they were too painful to feel at the time. And that outlook on life that I have and that I've had over the past couple of years, and none more so than in the past 18 months since having the miscarriage that I had last spring, it feels much more connected to something. It feels much more connected to myself. It feels much more connected to something far greater than me. It feels much safer to walk through the world. And one of the questions that I asked at the start of this session was, how would you walk through the world if you know that you are God? How would you talk? How would you move? How would you act? How would you behave? What would be your habits and behaviours if that you know that you are God and you know that you carry that divine spark within you? I know that there is an energy within us, and it is out there, and it is also within us, that is constantly guiding us down this glorious path to our dream lives. It's constantly asking us to evolve. It's constantly asking us to become more aware, become more conscious of everything that is happening in the world round about us, to serve not just ourselves, but our fellow man, starting with, you know, our family and then the community and then the world at large. that's a divine intelligence, a divine wisdom, an energy source that is within everything on this planet, that is constantly communicating to us from the outside and from within. God is constantly speaking to us. God is constantly delivering messages. God delivers these messages through your internal voice, through your intuition and your instinct, through sometimes you might hear the voice of people that you love and admire and trust, and also outside in every interaction that we have with every single person. If you could go around this week and just know that every single person that you meet is God, and that God is communicating through you, through that person, then you will look at the world in a whole new way. Not just every single person, but every single animal, every single plant, every single flower, every single tree, everything that's in this universe is constantly communicating something to us. It's constantly communicating to us through our cells of our body and guiding us on a glorious path to our glorious, most glorious, highest self, or most glorious, highest life. If you live your life with that knowledge, with that deep, deep knowledge within you, if you live your life with that internal knowing, with that feeling, with that intuition inside of you, if you walk through this world knowing that you are God, that you are divinely protected, divinely provided for, divinely guided to the highest path that you could possibly have as you go on this journey through life for however many years you're in on this journey, then you walk through the world differently. You see the world differently. You view other people differently as much as you possibly can, right? I try and align with that energy and that knowledge and that knowing within myself as much as I can. And then I still have a moment where I scrape my car on a little street in Gozo because some guys told me to pull into the left, and I'm really annoyed at the guy. And my fight or flight kicks in, and all the conditioning that I had growing up in Greenock just all comes to the front. I want to pull the guy out the car and start having a fight with him. And instead I've got to pull the car over and be like, no, no, everything happens for a reason. You're being divinely guided. What are you being asked to look at here? You're not being asked to go and fight with this guy that's told you to pull into the left. You're being asked to look within yourself and find out why this is happening. When you walk through the world with that knowledge and that feeling and that knowing inside of yourself, every day is an adventure, every day is exciting, every day is beautiful, every experience is beautiful, every experience is an adventure, every experience is an opportunity for growth and for evolution. And the world becomes a different place. Your life becomes a different thing. You realise it's not just your life, it's God's life. It's a life that belongs to the world and not just you. That you're here in service to other people, you're here in service to yourself, and you're here in service to the world at large. And that service is that part of you inside of you that carries that fragment of God, your soul. That fragment inside of you knows that every single person in this world is connected to you, and that they are a version of you outside yourself, and they're constantly delivering messages to you to remind you of that, to remind you that you're God, to remind you that you're the creator of your own reality, to remind you that you have this divine purpose, divine glorious path within you, that you can create anything. You can create so much good in your own life and in the life of others, and you've got every single thing that you need within you to create that. That's powerful. It's beautiful. It's the most divine source of energy that we have. I have it inside of me, you have it inside of you. That is what giving it to God is all about. It's also the messages that we receive are our constant reminder of that. God is constantly trying to remind us of that all day, every day. He reminded me of this disconnect that I feel from my childhood, from Scotland, and from even from the land of Scotland. He reminded me of that through an Uber driver. He reminded me that I'm divinely protected, divinely provided for, and divinely safe, and that there's always a solution to every problem. By the waiters in Al Sal saying, Ali, it's okay, we'll put your bins out for you. I just actually remembered another thing that happened, because when I say it's the bins, and it's not actually the bins, it's another thing. It's ever since Sarah left Malta in March, there's always been a thing with the bins when I've been in Malta. There's always been some sort of solution to the problem, which I'm just like, I don't think God wants me to learn the bin process. I think God's like, that's not your bit. You don't need to do that. So what keeps happening is I keep being provided with other people who do this part for me. because so that I can focus my energy elsewhere, which is also symbolic of many, many things that happen in our lives. It's like, okay, here's a solution to this problem. The story that came into my body while I was, it dropped in while I was in the flow of conversation there was when Sarah first went to Vancouver in March, I had the same thing happen. When I was staying on Malta, and I was staying in this absolutely beautiful apartment that was within a five-star wellness resort, and the same thing had happened. I had this matrix on the wall, and I was like, I don't know what to do about the bins. But once again, it wasn't the bins; it was the fact that everything was changing in my life. I'd applied for residency in Malta, and there was lots and lots of things going on at that time, both energetically, spiritually, and in the physical world. So it was manifested to me, it was this message that was being sent to me, oh, there's this fear around systems and processes that I need to look at, and what's the solution that I'm going to receive to this system. And so I'm in this absolutely stunning apartment and reading the Matrix, and I was like, and it's up in every apartment in Malta. In fact, no, sorry, I'm going to retract what I just said. There was no matrix in this apartment. That was the problem, because there's this photo is up. This like laminated matrix is up in every house I've ever been in Malta, and there wasn't one in this apartment. And so it came to where the bin was full, and I didn't know what to do. So anytime I had any sort of problem, I would just call down the reception of the wellness resort and tell them. So I called down the reception, and I said to the guy, my bin's full, and I don't have a sign on my wall to say what bins go out today and actually where they go. And this boy was like, I just remembered this boy on the phone. He was called Omar, and he was like, "Oh, Miss Larkin, I will be at your apartment in a few minutes. Just wait till I get there." And I was like, "Okay." And I hung up, and a couple of minutes later, the door of the apartment goes, and there's this young guy, Omar. He's really tall, and he's like, "Hello, Miss Larkin," and I'm like, "You can call me Ali." And he's like, "Hello, Ali," and I was like explaining. I was like, the bin system in Malta, and there's no sign on the walls. I don't know. And this boy, he was just like so shocked, and he was like, Ali, you don't have to take the bins out. That you don't have to do that. That's not your job. And he's like totally reiterating to me what I have been saying for 5 years. Like, it's not my bit. I don't take the bins out. By the way, I sound really precious. I do everything else. I just don't like taking the bins out, only because of this system in Malta. Um, and he was so shocked that I remember just cracking up laughing and calling my friend and telling her, and being like, he was really, really shocked by the idea that I thought that I was to take the bins out. He's like, no, no, like he's just looking at me like I was mental. He's like, no, no, you don't take the bins out. That's not your job. If you need the bins taken out, you call reception. We will come and take your bins out. And I was like, okay, all right. So, the time that I stayed there, this beautiful apartment in a little town called Rabat, he took the bins out for me. Omar or one of his colleagues would come and take the bins out for me. I just remember that while I'm telling the story from this week. And that so this has been shown to me time and time again. It's like there's a solution for every problem. There's a solution for every challenge that you will face. God is constantly telling you the solution right about you. And if you can't hear it, then he's going to send other people. He's going to send messengers. He's going to send resources. He's going to send people. He's going to send people to tell you the messages that you cannot hear. The thing with these two messages that I received, last week from the Scottish Uber guy and this week from John and his colleague down in Alsal, one of them felt really nice because I felt so divinely protected and cared for, and the other one felt quite challenging because I had to go and look inside at some residual trauma that's still there from my childhood. And, I cried a lot of tears over watching the Pan Am story, and also tears of sadness, tears of grief for the trauma that I suffered there. Not just the trauma that I suffered there, but the programming that it gave me for decades afterwards, and tears of connection and love and joy for the people of Scotland, because I said to my friend afterwards, every woman that volunteered to help the people that had lost their family members, it reminded me of every Scottish woman I know, every woman I know from Greenock. That's what they would do. They would take their jacket off and roll their sleeves up and get dug in and help, because that's what Scottish people are like. And I had buried that part deep inside of me because I was so disconnected from the land because of what had happened. And that message that came through from that Uber driver definitely made me feel a sense of discomfort. What did I grow more from? Which message did I grow more from? Which message did I release more stagnant energy from in the form of tears? It was the one that made me feel a great deal of discomfort. It was the message last week. The boys helping me with the trash, with putting the bin out. It's wonderful. It's just a reminder. It's a little nudge again to be like, Ali, you're constantly provided for, you're constantly protected. There's constantly a solution to every problem and every challenge that you will face. Just be open and receptive to anything that comes your way. The original message, the first message from the Uber driver was the one where I grew the most, where I learned the most, where I evolved the most, where I released the most, the one that I find most uncomfortable and most challenging, but also the one where I experienced the most growth and the most awareness of stuff that I carry within myself that I've now got to go and look at again, time and time again, you know, from childhood, that there's still that residual energy within me, that there's still tears to be cried, that there's still journaling to be done and meditation to be done on it. And it's definitely nowhere near as strong as what it was 6 years ago when I started on this journey, but it's still there. And I learned that through the messages that God put in my path in the form of an Uber driver. And then He also put other messages on my path in the form of the two wonderful waiters at Al Sal to say, but you're always divinely protected, you're always divinely provided for, you're always divinely safe when you walk through the world. If you have any questions, please write them underneath the video. I'm just going to reiterate, and I don't know how I've managed to remember this because most of this call has been me talking about how I don't remember the things. But Sarah said that, as Sarah said, we are changing the times or the time of this call, and it will no longer be 2 p.m. UK time on a Wednesday. It's now going to be 7 p.m. UK time on a Wednesday, so it'll be in the evening, 7 p.m. UK, 2 p.m. Eastern, and I think Sarah said 11 Pacific. That sounds about right, 11 Pacific. Malta, it's going to be 8 p.m. So if you're in Malta or Gozo or in Europe, then it'll be 8 p.m. And that's going to be as of next Wednesday. The link to register and come along to the call, as always, is here somewhere in the comments or in the description. And I will see you all next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK, and 8 p.m. Malta. And we'll see you then. And this week, just meditate on the questions that I posed at the start, which is, how would it feel if I loved every experience that I have? What would my life look like? And how would it feel to be me? Journal on them, meditate on them, journal on any findings that you have, and bring them to next week's session. And if you're feeling brave enough and courageous enough, then come on and have a hot seat with me, and I'll see you then. Thank you.